Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier with the first of my skills presentations. And let me say straight off, I do not mean to patronise, not at all, particularly as you are already a successful student, or else you wouldn't be on an IB programme. My sole aim is to help you build on your successes so as to achieve more success. And that's the key. What you are doing now is building on the skills you already have. And in truth, they don't change much. You'll just get more sophisticated in the way you use them. And what's more, you'll be using the same skills at university. They do not change that much. So, I'll repeat some of what I say in my IGCSE presentation. When I first became a teacher, a concept called active reading was all the rage, and I have to say, it stuck with me. Active reading means reading with purpose, looking for something from your reading. And what are we ultimately looking for as students? And I think I can safely add, students of any subject. We are looking for answers to questions. But that means, of course, we must have some questions in mind. And for history, I think the key questions are very simple. Who, what, how, why, to what effect, and to what extent, or how far. All this should hardly be surprising, for two reasons. First, historians in writing history ask questions themselves, and then set out to try and answer them. Read the introduction or the foreword to the works of the great historians. They will have questions set out in them. Secondly, history is debated. It's not a subject with definitive answers. What that all means is that the examiner might disagree with your conclusion, but she knows that others might well agree. She is looking for your awareness of a debate and your confidence in reaching your reasoned conclusion. But that's another matter and the focus of another presentation. But it means that asking questions is even more important. Look at these questions from paper 2. In what ways and with what results did two wars, each chosen from a different region, affect the role and status of women? How valid is the claim that in 1914 states went to war due to fear rather than for motives of gain? Select two leaders of single-party states, each chosen from a different region, and explain how and why the conditions of their state helped them to rise to power. To what extent is the term limited war applicable to 20th century conflicts? While paper 3 has included the likes of how important were appeasement and the collapse of the League of Nations as causes of the Second World War? Why did attempts at cooperation in Europe between 1919 and 1939 end in failure? How far do you agree that the Spanish Civil War was really an ideological struggle between fascism and communism? To what extent Were the policies of Nicholas II the main cause of the February-March Revolution in Russia? And as a last example, here's a collection of basic questions, all wrapped up in one. What is meant by a search for collective security? Why was it necessary? And how successful were European countries in their search between 1919 and 1939? And let's be clear, if you are asked to discuss something, you had better ask some questions of your own in the process. And that brings me back to active reading and to note-taking and to note frameworks. I use note frameworks all the time. I think they are so useful. Here's a specific note framework for the Nazis' policies on women that I use. Note how I use questions to direct reading and note-taking, though they don't have to be framed as questions. And note how I break the analysis down to enable more sophisticated answers to potential questions, and provide for examples and evidence where appropriate. Now, questions on paper 3 are less specific than they are for paper 2, so let's look at them first. Here's 3 examples. Evaluate the success of Hitler's domestic policies between 1933 and 1939. Hitler's rule in Germany gave most Germans what they wanted in the years 1933 to 1939. To what extent do you agree with this statement? Hitler's pre-war social and economic policies had popular support. To what extent do you agree with this statement? Now, in answering any of these, I would of course consider economic policies, which could give me the chance to focus on the working class. I could then consider Volksgemeinschaft, that would allow me to bring in the plight of the Jewish community, and I could focus on youth and women. And my notes for women, although they would be more detailed than necessary for paper 3, would nevertheless provide me with all I need. But paper 2, of course, may well have questions specific to women. Here's another 3 examples. Compare and contrast the impact of the policies of 2 authoritarian states on women. Authoritarian regimes encouraged women to work, but did not give them equal status with men. Discuss with reference to 2 authoritarian regimes. The domestic policies of authoritarian states rarely benefited women. Discuss with reference to 2 authoritarian states. And so my detailed and carefully targeted notes leave me fully prepared. And, do please note, help me for a propaganda question too. First of all, my framework provides you with an outline of the policies. The focus on how they were implemented, propaganda, incentives and restrictions, will help you begin to address whether they were successful or not. For example, incentives would be more likely to be well received, but not restrictions. Did the propaganda match the reality? If not, resentment would be more likely. And for Nazi Germany, the difference war made to the lives of Germans, including women, was profound. So it's well worth identifying that in your notes. The contradictions in Nazi policy regarding women is also worth noting, and that leads to whether their policies were realistic or not. Remove women from the workplace while you send most of your young men to war. Really? So, as to what goes in your notes, there will be some basic details. Perhaps names and job titles, events, or in this case initiatives, laws and the like. Dates within reason. And in my example, this would be pre-war or during the war. But when it comes to whether they were successful or not, you want the outlines of the two sides of the debate, examples and maybe evidence too. Perhaps a quote. Though be clear, it's okay to paraphrase a quote in the exam. And some assessment of the significance of a point, an argument, a policy, or whatever. And two, any links to other points you think are important. Now let me know if I've missed something out, and I've probably missed lots out. But at least I've hopefully got you thinking about the purpose of your notes. And something else that's easily doable in the age of the computer. It's to put in bold what would be essential for revision. That way your revision can be more time effective. And if there's something in your revision notes that leaves you uncertain about something, you can easily check it. I hope that makes sense. But don't forget that there are only so many points you can make in a timed essay. Only so much explaining you can do. So many examples you can give. So much evidence you can use. So don't get carried away. But the ultimate test is do your notes fit past questions? And if they don't fit all of them, well, you best add to them. After all, that's what they should be targeting. And my Puskin is targeting me right now. I don't know if you can hear her. But anyway, I hope that is useful for you. And I really hope I haven't patronised anybody. And don't forget that I might still have a tutorial slot available if you feel you'd benefit from that. Just get your parents to get in touch with me at historymadeeasier@gmail.com and we'll see if we can sort something out. But thank you so much for listening, and the very best of luck with your studies. Cheers.